There we go. We are live.
There we go, live. Oh, woohoo! Oh, Alan McLaughlin, you sneaky bugger, sitting with his finger on the. I'm getting in there.
There's two of them, James as well, both YouTubers. I think that's the first time that
The YouTubers in quick tonight. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
good evening, everybody. How are you?
Good evening. Yeah. We are in, as you could tell in the background, we're in the dram room, soon to be with Robin Laing. This is not our title. Obviously, this is the latest album.
David's so anxious to get in there. He's got typing dyslexia.
Hi, Gugs. Gugs up in the dram room. Yeah. He maybe said hi, Glugs, so he's glugging away.
He's glugging, that's what it is, yeah, absolutely. Hi, Dave. Hi, Alan. Hi, James. Hi, everybody else as you come along.
Good stuff. So welcome to our Blether tonight. We've got wonderful guest, somebody who's been out in the Whisky shop a couple of times performing for us, and who we've seen out and about performing all over the world.
Yeah.
So we've got a wealth of knowledge and experience and talent coming from at least one of us in the room. I don't know about the other two, but we'll do our best. We'll do our best. So we've got gogs, gigs, whatever. It's maybe a Campbelldown thing that David's mentioning. Yeah,
could be. Yeah,
that came up when we were talking to Ian McAllister. So Russell, what's in your glass tonight?
Well, there's only one thing I can put in my glass tonight, and that's a lovely wee drop of Laphroaig from the actual dram room, which I've just been slowly. It's not coming up well. There we go.
There we go.
Yep, that's it.
They say great minds think alike and fools seldom differ. So
fools seldom differ. Yeah, just definitely working. I'm definitely working the way through the bottle. It's fantastic stuff.
It's outstanding. I've poured a wee warm up dram. Just a Chivas Regal, the Mizunara Oak, actually.
Okay. Well, I've got myself a wee Talisker Amoroso red wine as well. So the Laphroaig is a Douro red wine, which I believe is from Portugal. And I've also got an Amoroso Talisker for just a wee nod at Talisker Bay, one of my favourite songs of Robin's.
So we'll bring Robin in because as always, the guys aren't in to listen to us. We will
absolutely not
bring in our guest. And Antia's here. Good evening, Antia. But good evening, first of all, Robin.
Hi, folks.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lovely to be with you, even if it's not in person.
Someday soon, that'll happen.
Someday soon, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting closer, though, isn't it? You get that kind of feeling. There's one or two things I still feel a little bit anxious about. I was into my local shop today and I put my mask on, and I think hardly anybody else had. I felt a wee bit weird, but I thought I'm not ready not to wear my mask yet. So,
yeah, you're like me. You're just so used to doing what you're told. I think.
Yes.
In my case, it's because I'm married.
Well, likewise.
There's a lot of us in that boat, Robin. Yeah, definitely. Cheers. What's in your glass tonight, Robin?
Well,
nothing now.
Great minds think alike.
Hey, well, it's a hat trick.
I've got that, but I thought I would lead up to it because I wanted a kind of more of an aperitif. So I've got a Society 2695. It's a Klein Leash, 10 years old, rose petals on a tropical breeze. I thought that would get me going. So that's what's in my glass at the moment. But when that's done, I'll move on to the Laphroaig. And if I need to go further than that, well, you can see I've got a few things sitting behind.
Got a few things there, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great stuff. So we've got lots of people coming in. We've got Antia, as we mentioned, Derek, James, Phil. Phil must have been putting the Wades to bed. He's a little bit latchy, 4 minutes late.
4 minutes past, Phil, yeah.
We've got Udo and Tobias back in. So hello, Tobias. He said, hello, Robin. You're his favourite Scottish Paderborn citizen. There you go.
Very nice.
So
that's where the dram room is, of course.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Your latest album. I was going to ask how long does an album take for you to write and produce? Just
Well, that can vary quite a lot. The last album, the one that we've just been obliquely referring to, called Up in the Dram Room, that didn't take very long because really it was a kind of a commission. You know, Thomas Evers of Malts of Scotland, based in Paderborn, he's a friend of mine, and he was aware that musicians like me were not getting any work during the lockdown. So he said to me, "Would you like to write some songs about, you know, my outfit, my whiskies, my business?" And I said, "Well, sure. It's not the kind of thing I normally do, but I'm doing nothing else. So send me some inspiration." So he sent me a large number of bottles to represent the different expressions and different lines, you know, that he has. And well, that's my whole life. You know, I get inspiration from this, which is it's quite handy, really, because if you're looking for inspiration in a glass, you mainly concentrate on that kind of mindfulness of drinking. It's not knocking it back and moving on to the next one, or busy talking to people and you don't really notice what you're drinking. You pay attention and you smell it and you taste it and you let your imagination roam free. So I did that basically over a few weeks. And each time I wrote a new song, I would make a little video of it and send it to him on WhatsApp. And if he liked it, well, there was none of them that he didn't like, but if he liked it, then we kept it. And by the end of the project, we had about, I don't know, a dozen songs. And he said, "They're so good, let's make a CD." So we did. We made a CD. And then, as you can testify, because you're holding it in your hand, he decided that we would also have a bottling, a whiskey to go with the CD. So we did that, and it was all great fun, fantastic fun. But that whiskey's all gone.
I was going to ask if there's any more, but
apart from one or two lucky people like us that still have some. But I think he has a plan to do another whiskey with a slightly different label, a different cask background, and that will be coming quite soon. We've got the artwork for the label, we've chosen the whiskey, etc., etc. So might be a whole series. You never know.
just from listening to it today, I don't have a CD player, so I eventually managed to download it on iTunes, so I could listen to it there. But I've opened up the CD, and I love the fact that we've got all the lyrics and everything. It's not coming up on the screen, but it's I get really frustrated when you buy music, or I used to buy an album or buy a CD, and it would just be the paper cover inside. You know, no, even just lyrics were enough. If there was artwork, fantastic. But that's one of the things I used to love about an album when I was younger, and you'll remember that as well, Robin, was you spent most of your time actually looking and reading the album cover and the lyrics, and that was a whole part of buying and listening to music.
Well, absolutely. And I think that now CDs are under definite threat from streaming and downloading.
Yeah.
And I regret that as a songwriter, because I don't get anything like, you know, the benefit, the financial benefit. The royalties are minimum. You've got to be Ed Sheeran or somebody before you make any money from it. So if you're going to try and continue to put out CDs, you've got to make them an attractive package.
Yeah.
And to me also, there should be some kind of a theme, because Spotify, for example, you can just select the odd track here and there. But to me, an album should have a kind of a flow to it. It should have a backstory, and it should be something that you listen to almost as a performance. It's almost like a gig, you know. And so I'm very careful about what songs I put in what order, the running order on a CD. But to go back to your original question, which is how long does it take? That one didn't take very long at all. But the one before, which was, can you see that? It's called Holding Gold.
Yeah.
There were only 2 whiskey songs on that, but the songs from on that CD, I had sort of put them to one side over maybe 10 years.
Okay.
And I had all these songs, ready to someday see the light of day. So that was a whole different project. For example, there's a song in there that I wrote for my daughter when she was, before she could even walk or speak. And she's 13 now. So, it's quite a long span of time. So it just really depends. Are you quietly saving the songs up for, someday bringing them together? And then you've got to decide what do you keep in and what do you leave out? Or are you specifically writing songs for that album? A lot of bands do that. Of course, they go in the studio. They take over a studio for a couple of months and just write the songs in the studio. But if you've any idea how much a studio costs by the hour, I can't do that. So.
Yeah. I'm assuming the song for your daughter was Miss Sunshine.
No.
Angel's Choice.
That's the wrong CD.
Oh, the wrong CD. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure she is Miss Sunshine anyway.
Miss Sunshine, if you want to know, is a corn whiskey liqueur produced by Thomas Evers in Paderborn. He's got two whiskey liqueurs, both made from German corn whiskey. One's called Miss Sunshine, and it's quite bright and sweet and popcorny, and the other one is called Uncle Joe's Hütte, which means Uncle Joe's hut or cabin, and it's a little bit more masculine and a bit more herbal, but they're both very nice whiskey liqueurs. So I sat and sipped them and came up with ideas for the songs.
I would love to know, and I know you mentioned in the album cover the Charlie O. I would love to know who the inspiration behind that song was, because in my head, when I think whiskey and Charlie, it's Charlie McLean. So I've got images of him at the moment.
I can tell you this: that the only Scotsman called Charlie who's actually been to the dram room in Paderborn is Charlie McLean. Charlie and I go back a long way. He was my mentor in the Scotch Malt Whisky Society,
right?
And we way back in the early days, we did gigs together. We did strange gigs all the way from Edinburgh to Toronto.
Right.
And Charlie, I invited Charlie to my stag night just before I was getting married, and he appeared at the stag do with his wife and his 3 sons. So I had to explain to him. He hadn't read the invitation properly, that there were no women allowed. So poor Sheila had to go back home, but I allowed the boys to stay because we were going to have a barbecue and a campfire and music. So they loved it.
Brilliant. We've got a comment from Tobias, a question from Tobias. Will you be at the Islay Festival, the Fish Isle?
Yes, I think I will. I've booked the hall, the Bruichladdich Hall, for, I think it's the 1st of June. It's the Wednesday anyway. My normal slot at the Islay Festival is on the Wednesday night at Bruichladdich Hall. And I've booked the hall, and all I have to do now is apply for the license and get Douglas McTaggart to do the PA for me again. So I think the answer is yes, I will be there.
I bet you can't wait to get back into the proper festivals and have people clinking glasses and shaking hands and singing along.
Absolutely, yeah. But that this online thing it was filling a gap, a need, but now it's beginning to have a life of its own.
Yeah.
And I'll give you for example, not this weekend, but the weekend after, I'm going to be in Switzerland doing some gigs. And my friend Udo, who I think is with us,
he
is watching. Yeah,
Udo asked me to do something for him for that same weekend, and it's I better not say too much because it might be a surprise, but doing something for Germany, And I'm also doing something, I've pre-recorded something for Australia, because the Malt Whisky Society in Australia wanted me to do something, and I couldn't do it live because I'm going to be flying from Edinburgh to Geneva as the event takes place. So I had to pre-record it. So that's 3. I can be in 3 places at once, thanks to the power of the internet.
It's like Phil Collins during Live Aid, just kind of starting off in Wembley and then off to LA.
Flying over. We've got Alan who's watching on YouTube. He's unfortunately got to drive home, so he's going to catch up later. But hopefully we can get this in before he disappears. So the question for Robin, when you're drinking whiskey, do you listen to music? What kind of inspiration do you get from that? Or is there what do you think pairs well with a dram?
Sorry, what was the last bit of the question? I heard a bit about the music.
Yeah, what music do you think pairs well with a dram? Or what dram pairs well with the music, I suppose, as well.
Vice versa.
Well, I mean, it depends on so many different things. Obviously, music and whiskey, that's my career. So I do think that they make a wonderful pairing. Yeah. But it depends on the moment and the mood and the whiskey. And, you know, you've got people like Hans Offringer have written whole books about pairing whiskey, different kinds of whiskey with jazz or with blues. If I'm tasting whiskey for a sensory purpose, you know, like tasting for the Malt Whisky Society at home or some other organization, normally with the Malt Whisky Society, we do it together in a group. But I sometimes taste whiskies and write notes. And if that's the case, then I put on some fairly gentle classical music, usually, something that won't intrude, you know, too much on my concentration. So I might put on some Einaudi, for example, just nice rippling piano music, or Schubert's late piano pieces, or something that can give me a sense of peace and relaxation without interfering with my thought processes or distracting me too much. But if I'm up the garden with my son, who's 19 and loves 1970s rock music and Americana and, you know, think country and stuff like that, then that's what we listen to. And then we're drinking whiskey for a completely different reason, different purpose. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if we have a conversation and taste the whiskey and have the music on at the same time, and occasionally get up and put another log on the fire. You know, it's a different experience. Yeah.
Has music always been an influence for you, Robin? I mean, thinking back to a very early age, can you remember when you first became properly interested or involved with music?
Yeah, I think music's always been with me as long as I can remember being a sort of teenager or adult. When I was a child, I wasn't so sure. There wasn't much music in my house. You know, nobody played any instruments. We were a large family of 2 parents and 5 kids in a 2-roomed, not 2-bedroomed, 2-roomed apartment in Edinburgh. So, you know, just getting on with life was noisy and chaotic. And I think my mother would listen occasionally to Nat King Cole or Jim Reeves or stuff like that, but not really any music. So it was when I was a teenager that I discovered, you know, the pirate radio stations, and discovered the Beach Boys and, you know, the Beatles and the Stones, of course, but also things like Simon and Garfunkel. You know, I've always been pulled towards the singer-songwriters. Yeah. You know, I love classical music, and I love singer-songwriter music. Some of it. What I don't particularly have any time for are songs that have lyrics that don't actually mean anything, because it doesn't matter, because the music is the primary thing. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And when did you start playing an instrument then? And you know, I guess there probably wasn't any sort of real encouragement as a youngster if it wasn't in your household. What kind of got you into playing?
As a teenager, when I was still at school, I got friendly with a guy called Donald, who's actually been my best man twice. I've been married 3 times, but he was the best man twice. Couldn't make it the middle time. And he introduced me to classical music. And I picked up I bought a guitar when I was about 16, I think. And of course, I would learn 2 or 3 chords and try to sing along with Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan lyrics and so on. But my real love was classical guitar, and I really wanted to be able to play classical guitar, but it's too bloody hard,
yeah, for sure.
You've got to spend hours at it, and I'm too lazy. Yeah. I am a completely lazy.
You've got the fingers of kind of, it's just incredible. You see these guys play.
Well, that just comes from practice,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, not for me, I'm afraid. I did learn to play 1 or 2 tunes, but I never did them well enough. So I gave it up. I went back to the 3 chords to accompany some words.
I love all music. I've a very eclectic taste, and certainly I went through a huge phase of listening to classical music. But it's quite unusual for a young teenager from Edinburgh, from the streets of Edinburgh, to be into classical music. I mean, did it just grab your ear, or?
Yeah, it was from my my friends, my significant others. I had a best friend called Jimmy. He was in my class. Donald was a year above, but he had a whole insight because of his family into classical music.
Okay.
And he would say, "Listen to this," and I had another friend called Vincent who was getting rid of an old gramophone, one of these old gramophones that you had to wind up and put the old what were they, 78s? Yeah. And he gave me the machine and a number of old 78s, and I was listening to some of the pop classical things, Handel and Rachmaninoff and Liszt and stuff like that. And really, it was a whole world to discover. But I was also, if I went to a concert in Edinburgh, I'd be able to go to a concert with Julian Bream, or I could go to a concert with the Corries. I've always had quite eclectic taste. I like music from lots of different genres. There's some that I'm not so keen on, but I won't say
indeed. Indeed, yeah. That's when you start to feel a little bit old sometimes, isn't it? You kind of think, what is that?
Might upset some of the listeners.
I'm sure. I suppose it's a little bit like whiskey in that way, where you'll have some outstanding favourites that you always go and listen to or drink. You'll have some that you enjoy, but you maybe wouldn't be your first pick. Some that you don't mind on, but or you don't mind drinking, and then there's some that you would kind of deliberately avoid as well.
There's some that you go back to time and time again.
Yeah.
But you've also got to keep an open mind with whiskey and with music, because if you decide that you don't like whiskey from this distillery or that distillery, that's something that the Scotch Malt Whisky Society has shown me over the years. I've been on the tasting panel for 25 years now, and the thing about the society is it's all single cask. And okay, it's fair to have some preconceptions about how a whiskey from, let's say, Glen Scotia is likely to differ from a whiskey from Longmorn, for example, or how a Highland Park might differ from a Colilla. But if you decide I don't like sherried whiskies, or I don't like that distillery, you won't be open to these surprises that always come.
As Mike says, I liken whiskey to music in the sense that there's some whiskies that you just can't do without. You just like time and time again. In the same way that there's some music that you like all the time. Just there are certain songs and certain musicians that you never ever dislike, but other ones come and go depending on your mood, depending on what's happening in your life. And the same with whiskey.
Exactly.
It depends on your mood and stuff like that as well.
That having an open mind is certainly, because when me and Tori were dating, this was before we were married. I must have done something terrible to that I needed to go buy her tickets to an Ed Sheeran concert to either make up for it or something. But we went to, and I wasn't an Ed Sheeran fan, to be honest. He was one of those in the background if it was on, but Tori loved him and had him playing ridiculous amounts of time when she was studying for her degree and that. And we went, and when I was in the audience watching, I was, the respect for this solo guy playing on a loop recorder, so everything he did was himself, and he had, I don't know, 10,000 people in the palm of his hand. I was like, you know what, there was a whole new level of respect and experience in that. And some whiskies, I think, as well, you have to, like you say, go and experience it. Don't think I don't like that because this is what I think it's going to be. Crack it open, give it a bash, and
keep an open mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Udo's kind of asking about when the whiskey, and because I guess in that sense, I suppose, as a young teenager, music came first. So when did whiskey kind of come on the go then? Or, I mean, I suppose we all dabbled in our dad's whiskey cabinet when we were very underage, but in a proper sense, I guess, when did whiskey kind of come into the scene?
No, my dad never had a whiskey cabinet, and he might have bought the occasional. No, I was more likely to buy bottles of Lanlick or Eldorado cheap sherry, but anything that he had in the house would be drunk by him within hours. he did most of his drinking at the pub.
Yeah.
I was given whiskey to taste when I was about 16 at a Hogmanay party, and I thought it was disgusting.
Yeah.
And of course, it was probably the cheapest blend possible, and I wasn't used to it, and I just didn't. That put me off whiskey for a number of years. How I got into it was I was working for the summer in the Laphroaig Hotel in Laphroaig, and my job was to look after the cocktail bar because I could speak in an accent that tourists would understand. So they put me in the cocktail bar, and they were very ahead of their time. This was in the early to mid 70s. And they had a lot of single malt whiskies, and they even had a kind of menu, a list of the whiskies. So people would come in, whether they were English or German or American or whatever, they would come in and they would say to me, "Oh, I'm really interested, but I don't know what's the local whiskey and what's the best, what's the oldest, what's the dearest," all these questions. And I felt I had to do a little bit of research. So I went along the gantry and tried a few of the whiskies, and most of them confirmed the fact, my prejudice that I didn't really like whiskey. And then I discovered Talisker 100 Proof, and that was the one that opened my eyes. Yeah. And Talisker 100 Proof was my favourite dram. It turned me on to single malts right there and then. And it was helpful that it was also the local distillery. It was the nearest distillery to Laphroaig, the other one being Ben Nevis, but there was no contest as far as the whiskies were concerned.
Yes. Yeah, we always talk about Ben Nevis being the wrestling dram.
So that was me into single malts as and when I could afford them. Even as a student, I always had a bottle of Inchgower or something kicking around,
Yeah.
But then later on, my second wife bought me a membership of the Malt Whisky Society for my birthday one year, and that opened up another whole area of whiskey drinking to me.
Yeah. So Inchgower's not that far from where I stay, then, but not a whiskey you can get your hands on a regular basis. But I suppose the basis.
No, it was always one of the main components in Bells, wasn't it?
Bells, yeah.
There are a few indie bottlers coming out with some Inchgowers now.
Inchgower, yeah. That's my only experience of it.
The Glen had one fantastic.
They did.
I think I've got a society one up here somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you said 25 years you've been with the society. We have James, who's on Facebook. He keeps thinking of joining the society, but it's another line of whiskey, and he's debating how much whiskey he can buy. And I think the society have so many releases a year. You have to kind of, or some people, if you're within my budget, you have to be very picky of what you go for and that.
Yeah, well, you can always be guided by the wonderful tasting notes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Which brings us in. I mean, there's a question: who writes these tasting notes for the?
Well, at the moment, there are 4 of us that write them, and each we have a kind of house style, that we've agreed on with the society. But on the other hand, we are all approaching it with our individual literary style, and the things that we make allusions to, and who's the Boris Johnson that keeps putting Latin words in and things like that.
I hope it's not Boris Johnson, for goodness sake.
We used to get away with things that we don't get away with anymore.
Yeah.
One of my whiskies had a tasting note. It was whiskey flavored condoms and skunk roadkill.
Okay.
And that was that's a tasting note title that combined humor and honesty. And we are allowed to be honest, because to be fair, these days, if a whiskey passes the panel, it has to be good enough,
Yeah.
And the panel are mostly independents. They're not staff of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. They're independents, so we have no reason to pass bad whiskies. So if it passes the panel, then the writer, the person who's writing the note, is generally speaking on that panel. So that skunk roadkill was a whiskey that passed the panel, but in those days there was a panel of about 8, and I didn't particularly like it, but my vote didn't count enough, so it passed. So I got my revenge when I wrote the tasting note.
That's a tasting note of Sean Locke standard, that one. That's kind of...
Yeah. Is it an open conversation when you're doing these tastings, or do you keep everything quite private until the end? Because it's quite easy to get influenced by what other people think as well, isn't it?
Well, these days, because in recent times, because of COVID, we've been doing it like this, so we have a conversation on cyberspace, online. And what we do is we each individually smell or taste the whiskey and write down our notes. And then when we've finished, we say, well, I got this, or I did that, I thought that, and we compare. But we don't then go back and change our notes. So it's absolutely not influenced by any other members. But I mean, I'm sufficiently well versed in the psychoanalysis of human groups to know that if you sit together and talk about it as you go, people are influenced by each other.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And that's how it used to happen in the society. And we've tried very hard to eliminate that, so that we do make up our own minds and write what we think before we have the discussion. It's interesting.
It must get quite hard to come up with original notes after you've done it for such a long time, or is it still easy to find?
No, it's not. It's not easy. You've got to really work hard not to keep falling into the same pattern. But it's a bit like writing songs in that respect. Each songwriter has his or her particular style. They have the instrument, they have the chord patterns that they're familiar with, or the keys that they're familiar with. They have, ways that have worked in the past of creating song structures. And you've got to be careful that you don't end up with every song sounding like one that you wrote 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And that can happen to the best. I was watching a program on the telly about Bruce Springsteen. And there are 1 or 2 of his songs that, because they've got the same drum rhythm, the same electric guitar riff type, you have to think hard. Is this a different song from the one I heard 3 numbers ago?
This was the classic is Kenny Rogers, and you got the Gambler and the Coward of the County.
Yeah.
No matter how many times you start singing one, you'll always end up singing halfway through, and you'll change. You'll sing the other one.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's good that songwriters and singers have their own style, because that's what the audience warms to. You know, they like that style, they like that voice, they like the way that person moves on the stage. If it's Mick Jagger, for example. I'm not moving like Mick Jagger on the stage. Not even the old Mick Jagger. I have enough trouble standing and not falling over.
I was going to say, after we've had a few whiskies, I'm sure we can all move like Mick Jagger, even though we mean it or not.
Yeah, that's true. You can try, but don't let anybody video you, because you won't.
No, for goodness sake.
No, we'll be long off live before we do that. That's why you never see us standing up during these tastings.
Yeah,
these chats.
Very wise, very wise. And it's like that old story where the guy says, "My back goes out more than I do these days." If you're trying to move like Mick Jagger, you might suffer for it the next day. Look, my glass is empty.
Oh wow, I'm going to have to replenish that one then. Yes, here we go.
You're going to have to join us, because I don't know if you noticed, but I just poured my one about 5 minutes ago as well.
I mean, you can't go wrong with this. 19-year-old from a Portuguese red wine cask. Wow.
It's 8.1% Douro wine. I felt really bad because
I don't think I've ever actually had this wine, though. Have you?
No, not the wine itself.
No.
Douro. Yeah, I've had it many times.
I've had some Portuguese wine. The only Portuguese wine I've had, it's although it's a cork top, it's a screw-off cork.
Yeah.
With I can't remember where I got it from.
Is it a white wine?
No, it was a red wine. But it was a cork stopper, but it kind of screwed off. So right. it had a thread on it, even though it was a cork stopper. Mm-hmm. It was quite a bizarre concept.
Yeah.
I don't know that one.
But it was a nice wine as well. I did enjoy. Remember enjoying it. Yeah.
I felt really bad, Robin, when we were at the Balmoral at the Whisky Awards, and Robin came over. We were sitting at the table, and he took out his bottle and he says, "Do you want to have a wee taste?"
Poor show, mate.
So he poured this. I've got a wee dram here as well. Took my hip flask for him, and I think there was so little left in the hip flask. I coated the bottom of your glass, and I was just like, "Oh, it's a major."
Not good enough.
I did. That was my
next time. You have to take a bottle.
Yes, that was my first dinner like that. So I wasn't sure of the etiquette of taking your own bottle in there.
Well, I was at an event in Germany a few months ago. It was the Highland Circle 30-year celebration or something, and I was at the same table as Thomas Evers from Malt of Scotland. He doesn't take a bottle; he takes a bag with a number of bottles, And we were talking about real fantastic whiskies there, old Laphroaigs, old Bunnahabhain, even a Port Ellen, and of course a bottle of this as well.
Mm-hmm. It is. Udo's obviously had it before. He's raving about it. He's asking if you drink it with straight, or do you have a wee touch of water?
In this situation, I have it with a wee touch of water.
Yeah.
Because, I usually try it without first, but a wee touch of water in case it goes for my delicate throat membranes and I can't talk.
A wee touch of water for me as well, Udo, with this one. Really opens it up.
I'm having mine neat just now, but I think I think it depends as well on your mood and things. It's quite cold and where I am just now, so something to warm me up. I'm in my office is getting rejigged into another spare bedroom, so there's no heating or curtains or anything, so it's a wee bit chillier than it usually is. So I'm enjoying the warmth.
You need your central heating.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So can you? Where was your first gig then, Robin? The very first gig, and how did it go?
Well, when I started writing songs when I was quite young, but only for myself, or for my my wife, close friends. I was too shy to perform.
And were these mainly sort of traditional folk songs?
No, I did learn a few traditional folk songs. I like to sing them, but I was writing songs, just kind of love songs and so on. I think in the 1980s, I used to go to a place called the Royal Oak in Edinburgh.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a downstairs bar, and people would, on some nights of the week, they would have a singing session. And I would go along, and after a couple of beers, I would loosen up enough that I would join in with the choruses. But the two sisters that ran the session, if you like, one of them noticed that she thought I had quite a good voice, so she kept pestering me to sing a song, So I did eventually learn a song and sang it in it, and I got quite positive feedback. And then I wrote a song called The Union Canal, which they were all raving about. So that gave me the encouragement to go on. But I was still very shy. It took me years of working on my own, afraidness of performance.
Performance anxiety, yeah.
Yeah, I had that big time.
Happens to the best of us, Robin.
Absolutely, yeah, totally familiar.
Well, I nearly gave up, because of it. But in the end, I decided that I would try and do some clinical psychology on myself, and so I worked at it and gradually got more and more relaxed with it. And it never completely goes away, but you wouldn't know it now.
You learn to live with it, don't you? You learn, you know what it's about. So you know it's just a process you've got to go through. Because once it's passed, you feel so much better. So
if you see me on stage, you wouldn't think that I'm nervous. But if you talk to me before a gig, you might pick it up.
I totally understand that. Yeah, I'm a bag of nerves before a tasting, let alone anything else. So, yeah, I absolutely understand. So yeah, so so it went well. So it just kind of started to steamroll from the Royal Oak into.
Yeah, and then at that time, there's a guy called Ian Green who was a retired police inspector in Edinburgh, and he had started up a company when he retired, selling CDs and records, and he would go around the folk festivals with these little stalls selling them, and eventually he decided to actually have a record label. So he was quite interested in getting fairly unknown people, to make a record and give them a chance to be heard. But he also recorded some well-known people like Dick Gaughan and the McCalmans and so on. Anyway, he approached me because his wife liked my stuff. I think this was probably around about 1989. That was when my first album came out. Anyway, it was a big deal for me. I got a record deal. Green Tracks wanted me. I was their 21st release. Right. So, and that was all my own songs, nearly all my own songs.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal for me. And then I did a few more CDs with Green Tracks, and the more you make CDs, the more you have to go out and do gigs to try and take the songs to people and sell the CDs. I've now done about 11 or 12 CDs, maybe 11. 6 of them are Whisky CDs, and the other ones nobody ever cares about because
I'm sure they do. They always do.
My audience is nearly all Whisky people.
It's not just music though. You do poetry and you write books as well. So you're kind of covering all the arts. Well, maybe not all the arts, but you're covering a fair portion of it. And it's World Book Day today, so it would be rude of us not to.
Well, I've been dipping into. This was given to me as a Christmas present a couple of Christmases ago, which is great. Just love the stories. I love the poem about the weapons of mass destruction as well, which which is good fun.
I had a lot of fun writing that book.
Yeah.
To begin with, I wanted to write a book about Brooch Laddie, and I mentioned it to Mark Rainey, and Mark said, "Robin," he said, I would love you to write a book Bruichladdich, but we've just a few months ago agreed with somebody else that they would do it. So if you want to do it as well, go ahead. It'd be fine to have 2 books about Bruichladdich because yours would be quite different. And I said, no, I won't do that. That's fine. Let them get on with it. But then I had the idea, because I'd got so many stories through these folk at Bruichladdich, because they were all great storytellers. Jim McEwen's a fantastic storyteller. And Mark's pretty good as well.
Yeah.
And so I got interested. I mean, even before that, Bowmore had asked me to do a storytelling gig in the vault, in their number one warehouse.
Wow.
So I did research some of the old tales from Islay. And I thought, I think there's enough material between my own stuff and the Bruichladdich stuff and the Bowmore stuff. And if I just do a little bit of research, I can come up with whiskey-related legends or stories from Islay. And that's what I did. And some of them I pulled out of the old Gaelic tales. Some of them are historical. Some of them are completely mythological and legendary, and some of them are made up by me.
Yes. It's a great read.
Your own stories there and see if anyone picks up on the...
It's a fabulous read, and one of these ones just perfect for when you're sitting down with a dram, just to grab another little chapter that kind of takes your fancy and just dip in and out of it. I love it for that. Yeah,
I've got my favourite. I think is Uncle Wolf. Have you read that one?
I haven't read that one yet, so I'll earmark it just now.
I've got a collection of Italian folk tales by Italo Calvino, and there was one of the stories in there that I thought I can adapt this. I can adapt this. So I made it about. I think I set it in Ballygrant on Islay, and it's a bit of a completely made up story, but it's good fun. I love it because it's about the little girl who is almost Little Red Riding Hood type. She's galloping through the woods with a basket of goodies for Uncle Wolf, but she eats all these cakes and I can't remember what it is. It's oat cakes and bannocks or something, but she eats them all and she drinks his whiskey and then she replaces his cakes with mud pies and fills his whiskey bottle with ditch water. So she drops them inside the door and says, "There's your stuff, Uncle Wolf. Bye." Wolf rushes off. But Uncle Wolf comes to our house, and I just love the ending.
Yeah. The moral of the story.
Yeah, let's not give it away, guys. Buy the book.
I'm not going to spoil it for you.
Brilliant. Yeah, fantastic. I love it. Yeah,
I think
just be careful with everybody else's whiskey.
When I think, Robin, of yourself, and you've obviously got this very close affinity with Islay, and I always think when I speak to you, it's Bruichladdich or the Islay. You're is it the dark? You're on the album, the dark side of Islay.
Yeah, the poem.
Mm-hmm. The poem is absolutely amazing. But you've also got the Whisky River as well, which is about the Speyside side of things. And would you say that Islay is more your cup of tea, or you've got more of that kind of bond with the island than any other region?
I have a powerful bond with Islay, but also with Speyside, and I love the fact that they're so different. Although these differences, can begin to blur now, because, as you know, there are quite a few distillers now in Speyside creating peaty whiskies. I've even here got a peated Glenfiddich. So, the lines are blurring a little bit, and some of my favourite Islay distilleries, Bruichladdich and Bunnahabhain, and traditionally never did peated whiskies anyway. So, to me, it's more about the landscape and the culture and the people. And I think where you have a concentration of whiskey making, like you do on Islay and like you do in Speyside, it becomes somehow much more part of everyday life and is reflected in the culture and the stories that people tell in the, you know, in the pastimes and that they have, and what they take to the village dance, you know, all that sort of thing. So that's why I love those areas. But I'll tell you a bit of a secret. My original plan when I did the Whisky River was to write a series of books about all the distilleries of Scotland. And I agreed this with Lewis Press, the publishers, and I thought I'll start with Speyside because it's so concentrated.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have to spend days and days traveling hundreds of miles between the distilleries. So that was the logistical reason for choosing Speyside. And then I did that, and then the next one was going to be the Highland distilleries, and I got, I would say, 2/3 of the way through doing the research and the visiting.
Okay.
And we had a baby that died, and somehow that knocked me off my perch for a while. And because that was the piece of work that I was in the middle of doing, it was the one piece of work that I could never easily go back to.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
in the end, I said to Lewis, let's just leave it at Speyside. It stands on its own. It would have been lovely to go on and do the Highlands and then the Islands and then the Lowlands, and that was one reason why I stopped. But the other reason is that there are so many new distilleries now that it's kind of hard to keep up with it all, and I just don't have the time or the energy, to be honest.
So I mean, I never thought that whiskey. I mean, obviously with the releases, you're always trying to keep up, but now you're almost keeping up with distilleries as well as those releases from the distilleries. There's so many new ones, and every time you kind of open Facebook, there's another one announced. Obviously, the 2 new in Campbellton just last week, and every Islay is going to be potentially home for another 3 or 4 yet. That if they all get the go ahead. It's
well, they probably will, but there is an infrastructure problem with Islay.
Yeah.
And some people on the island think enough is enough. But like everything, there are always differing views.
Housing and all these kind of things are a bit of an issue. I guess we had a chat with the Christopher Coates from the Whisky magazine last week, and that was kind of one of the issues that came up, which is interesting. But David saying he always thought, I've not been to Ireland, but I know exactly what you mean about Speyside. And the thing I love about Speyside is you're just immersed. Everywhere you look, there's a distillery. There's a tanker lorry, a freight lorry, or a grain lorry going past you all the time. So that the whole everything that you see about the area is the industry, just everything.
And the pagodas.
I imagine Islay is maybe a bit like that as well, although I've never been. But David's saying he loves it because it's a place that don't lock their doors. I was thinking they probably don't do that in Speyside either, but that's probably because they're too drunk to remember. But
no, it's because they got nothing worth stealing.
Well, there's that as well.
They've drunk it all.
Yeah.
I see a wee note from Tobias who said that when he was in Scotland, he saw a vending machine selling whiskey-flavoured condoms. Well, so it just shows you that I didn't make it up. I did have a little packet of them in my whiskey cabinet for a long time, and then they disappeared. I don't know what happened to them.
I'm not quite sure I get the point of a whiskey flavoured condom, but maybe that's just me.
No, and if you want, without getting too graphic about it, just put on a normal condom and stick it in a glass of whiskey.
Well, there you go. There you go.
There's a third subject to avoid: politics, football, and whatever you know.
Whiskey flavoured condoms. Well, Tobias never mentioned if he bought one, so
he didn't. No,
maybe he's got one sitting in his cabinet, the same as you had, Robin.
It's important to stay safe, guys. It's important to stay safe.
It also makes you wonder what kind of whiskey it was. Did it have the Campbellton funk about it, or was it a smoker?
Oh, come on!
I think it was probably Bell's. Did you hear the one about the woman who got drunk on Bell's?
No.
When she woke up in the morning, her knickers were ringing.
Oh dear.
Brilliant. Russell, we've never thought about starting this at 9 o'clock, have we? Because I think the chat can go a wee bit after the watershed.
Sometimes we think we should. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure it's all adults that are listening in.
I would like to think so.
We were due to have a blether with Santa just before Christmas. Unfortunately, Santa couldn't manage for various reasons. But we did realise that night we were going to have to explain to anybody that normally listens that you've got to keep this clean for the first half hour because people will probably have their kids on listening to Santa.
They could have, yeah.
And we also had to say to Santa, you need to keep it clean for the first half hour as well. We'll make sure.
I see, Mike, your wife's listening as well, and giving you a bit
typical.
of a
it's the one time she's watching, and get in trouble for it. So I'd say we need a Robin section every month. We could. I don't think I would ever get bored of that, to be honest.
Absolutely not.
Well, maybe we should move on to safer territory then.
Hey, Robert, we very rarely go on brand or go kind of publicise things, but we are very excited about the Highland Whisky Academy coming up in a couple of weeks. So hopefully we can get you singing some tunes to the guys on there, maybe over a couple of nights. But I really can't wait to get you up to our new dram room
to the
that
bar,
we've got in the shop.
Yeah.
Which is completely changed.
Our drum room, yeah.
And hopefully we can do something in person very soon. I wasn't going to touch on it, but we've spoken a lot about your music and things. Do you have a guitar handy? Or are you warmed up in tune? You can say no if you
I have a guitar handy. I wouldn't say I'm warmed up. No, I'm not really prepared. What did you want me to do?
No, not at all. Just if you feel like absolutely no pressure whatsoever. Absolutely.
The trouble is, I'm half pissed now.
I guess the problem with being a musician is that everywhere you go, once the evening gets going, everybody wants you to play. And I guess most of the time you probably enjoy that, but there must be sometimes you're like, "Oh, I'm just out for a pint, guys, for Christ's sake."
Yeah. I loved it that first time you came up to play for us. We got back to the bar, and you were just, "I'll just have a Corona. A bottle of Corona is nice, and we'll have a game of pool." And it was just everyone kind of double took, and they're like, "You're not having a whiskey? Are you sure you don't want a whiskey?" Like, just a nice beer, and I'm downtime. And I think that's something that everyone forgets about when you, especially when you perform, and people see you perform and talk about whiskey kind of constantly. And I'm sure guys like Jimmy Keown or Charlie McLean and Mark Thompson, all these are the same, because they're constantly talking whiskey. You just expect them that's what they drink. So when they ask for a beer or a pint or a gin or something, it kind of does just take you a step back. And I know when I go into a bar and ask for, we had Alistair Day from Rassay in doing a tasting at the shop, and we went to one of the local bars, and I was like, "Oh, can I just get a blend and a ginger ale, because I just wanted something long and refreshing." And the guys were like, "Really? Is it just really thirsty? Wanted something very question."
Sure.
Do you get that quite a lot when people are quite? You don't drink whiskey all the time?
Yeah, I do. Let me think of a kind of comparison would be a comedian. Comedians must have their serious side as well. And if you meet a comedian in the pub after the gig, you're expecting them to continue to produce lots of jokes and funny material, you might get a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
I was friendly many years ago when I was a student with Matt McGinn, and Matt stayed in my flat for a while in Edinburgh, and he would be round in Sandy Bell's, the pub, or he'd be doing a gig for the teacher training course, Murray House. And all of that time he's on performance mode. You know, he's in the pub and he's telling stories and singing songs, and then he would come back to my place, and it was like a switch. You know, he would sit there with a dram, or in his case sometimes a vodka, and he was almost morose. You know, he needed space from that performance mode, and everybody's always got another side to them. And I mean, I love music, but when I'm in a performance mode, that's a slightly different thing. And especially when a gig's finished, and I go back to the pub, like you were saying, Mike, you know, what I don't want then is people to be saying, come on, Robin, give us another song, you know, play us your 10 guitars.
You want to relax with that time and reflect back on your gig, and you kind of, you do a bit of analysis about how you felt it went, and
you just need to calm down. You know, you need. If I come home from a gig, I can't just go straight to bed.
No way.
Too much buzzing in my head. You know, I have to find it just quiet time to calm down. I might listen to music or read a book or have a wee dram or something, or a chamomile tea with blossom honey in it or something like that. And it's the same with whiskey drinking.
SNWS releases, is it chamomile tea and blossom honey?
You never know. we certainly get chamomile and honey on tasting notes quite often. Yeah,
I can imagine.
I see there's a request. Tony
loves whiskey for breakfast.
Whiskey
physically
for
breakfast. and acoustically.
Well, let's see how it works. Okay, I could tell you
only if you're happy, Robin. We don't want to.
It's only one song. I can tell you the story about the Scotsman and the Englishman who were having an argument about who does the best breakfast. You know, is it the full Scottish breakfast or the full English breakfast, which is superior? Because Scotsmen and Englishmen argue about everything. And the Scotsman was saying, well, you know, we have things that you guys never even heard of. We have Aberdeen butteries and Lorne sausage and Stornoway black pudding and, all these fantastic ingredients, Ayrshire bacon and tatty scones. You could just go on and on and on. And the Englishman said, well, yeah, we have our cultural applications. We have Cumberland sausage. So the Scotsman jumped to his feet and pulled a knife out of his sock and was about to cut the Englishman's throat. And the Englishman said, what did I say? What did I say? And the Scotsman said, well, you should know that Cumberland, ever since 1746, Cumberland is a dirty word in the Highlands of Scotland. Don't ever say it again. So the Englishman said, oh, please put your knife away. I promise I won't. I didn't realise and I won't say it again. So the Scotsman put his knife away back in his sock, and after a minute or two, when they were just beginning to calm down, he started to giggle, and then he started to laugh. And the Englishman said, now I'm confused. 1 minute you're threatening me with your knife, and the next minute you're laughing. Are you deranged? You know, what's going on? The Scotsman said, well, you know, this is the truth. I'll tell you the truth. We don't actually eat that stuff for breakfast. That's just for the tourists. So the Englishman said, well, okay, I understand that, but maybe you should tell me what you do have for breakfast, and, you know, I'm interested. And the Scotsman said, oh, that's easy. I have the same every single day in life. I have the same breakfast. I have a big plate of haggis, I have a border collie dug, and I have a large whiskey. And the Englishman said, really? Yep. He said, what's the border collie dug for? He said, the Scotsman said, to eat the haggis. Cheers.
Slides.
I don't know what the audio sound will be like for this. We've not done a sound check, so this might be a bit ropey. I don't know.
Sounds okay to me.
I take whiskey for my breakfast to see me through the day. Just one little whiskey helps me on my way. Clears my tubes, thins my blood, clarifies my head. Just one little whiskey, then I go back to bed. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. Now some folk love their cornflakes and others porridge oats. Shredded wheat, sugar puffs, whatever floats your boat. If I have to eat grass for breakfast, this is the kind I'll choose. A little bit of barley converted into booze. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. Good to see Russell joining in there. Well, I come from the land of Calvin, the devil, and John Knox. Whiskey land, no, I forgot the bloody. I come from the land of Calvin, the devil, and John Knox. Winter lasts for half a year, we sleep in woolly socks. If I lived in southern lands and woke up in the sun, I wouldn't need breakfast whiskey, well, maybe just the one. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. Old cloudy old Bernasconi lives in San Moritz, and he cleans his teeth with whiskey. He very seldom spits. He brushes, he gargles, swallows it with glee. And then he comes down for breakfast, and he has the same as me. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. And when I go to Islay, I party all night long. Fun and drams and stories, even the occasional song. Sometimes I take breakfast before I go to bed. But if there's nothing in the fridge, well, I have another dram instead. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking. And when I go to Dufftown, I stay at the Tannoch Bray, and Alan keeps some whiskey in an aerosol spray. He spreads a mist of whiskey over my beans on toast, and then he squirts some on my tongue, and I like that the most. I don't need no scrambled eggs. I don't need no bacon. A single malt is all I need to stop my hands from shaking, to stop my knees from quaking, to stop my bones from aching, to stop my skin from flaking, to stop my heart from breaking. And unless I am mistaken, I'll be dancing like a Jamaican. Oh, whiskey for my breakfast, and I'm limbo dancing all day long. Thank you very much.
But I can hear Tony clapping down the stairs as well, so I'm sure everyone watching is giving a wee round of applause. Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely
fantastic.
And it just shows you can do it off the cuff without the warm-up.
Absolutely. David Muir's just saying about Ian McAllister kind of thing.
Who knows?
There's not much
Who
even
knows? Exactly. Oh, fantastic. Rick, yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Robin. Yeah, absolutely. That was superb.
You're very welcome.
I think everybody enjoyed that. This is obviously on the Glengeary playlist. Kat's listening in tonight as well. Kat and Tony worked together at Glengeary, and they came over to Islay. I think it must have been about 2 years ago because it's in their Facebook memories. So
2 years this week.
they were over at Bowmore and Laphroaig as part of the kind of sister company, but also I think they managed to visit everybody else as well.
Yeah, they were. And if you're still watching, they were up at Kilhoman.
Yes, they were. Yeah,
I think Kat was the first one to buy the Madeira cask when it came into the shop. So
yeah,
very nice.
Yes, it's on the Glengeary playlist. So there you go.
Yeah, I think Tony worked there, so she was at Glendronach, and then came to Glengeary, and then during lockdown she came to work for us full time at the shop, and dealing with all the virtual tastings and online demand. And I think the Glengeary Visitor Centre, they had maybe about 12 songs played on loop for the whole day. So Tony's was tasked with livening it up a bit, and I think she stole all my Robin Laing CDs and downloaded them and uploaded them onto their iPad or iPod or whatever it was that they used. So you still, whenever I go in, there's still some Robin Laing singing away in the background. So.
Oh yeah, that song's played on a regular basis on the tour bus as well. When we head off, our tours tend to head off at 9 a.m. We typically give the guys a dram in the bus while we're heading off to the first stop, and we talk about Whisky for breakfast, and usually put this on the CD player in the van as well. So yeah.
It comes up in some strange places. It's one of the most satisfying things about being a songwriter. I remember I was driving Thomas Evers around Speyside and various places. I think we went to Tomatin. Anyway, we were passing near to Glenord, and he said, "Let's go into Glenord," just completely unannounced, We went into Glenord and asked if we could get a wee tour, and the lassie behind the counter was, "Oh well, I don't know. It's the tours are actually finished for the day." And they were playing my CD on the loudspeaker. I said to her, you know that's my music that you're playing? "Oh, is it?" She says. "All right." So she made a wee phone call, and a guy came down and gave us a tour. So it works.
Absolutely.
It opens doors as well.
Yeah.
I've got an interesting story, though. I do quite a lot of work in Switzerland, and I was doing this private gig for a guy called Daniel Widmer in Lucerne. He had invited people to his house and whiskey tasting, and I was doing some music. And by way of introducing me, he told the people this story. He said he'd been working really hard and he needed a few days break, so he'd gone off down to Bergamo in Italy, and he was in a hotel and having a nice time, relaxing and going around the streets and the shops. And he went into this place that had a Thai or Asian massage, just to help him relax. And there was a beautiful Asian woman at the counter, took his details and sent him in. But when he got in there, it was a very old woman with wispy grey hair and one tooth that gave him his massage. Kind of what usually happens. But anyway, he said he was lying there enjoying the massage, and there was music playing. And he said, I suddenly thought, wait a minute, I recognize that music. And it was a Robin Laing CD. So when he was leaving, he said to the woman at the counter, that guy's going to be playing in my house in 3 weeks' time. What? How come you've got his music in this, massage parlor in Bergamo? She said, oh, my husband and I were in Scotland on holiday, and we were in a place called Ullapool, and we asked them, in a shop, we asked them to recommend some CDs of Scottish music, and that was the one we liked the best. So I play it. So, it's almost unbelievable that my music was being played in a massage parlour in Bergamo. Maybe I could get a free massage.
What's the strangest place you've played a gig then?
All right, I've played a few strange places. I played one time in an antique shop in Liechtenstein.
Okay.
And it was a local whiskey club, and I think one of the members owned this antique shop, so that was the venue. Another member of the club was the local butcher, and he had prepared steak tartare, which, as you know, is uncooked meat. So I'm having to sing and have whiskies with all these guys in an antique shop eating steak tartare. That was a little bit unusual.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think I can manage. I've never tried a steak tartare, but I'm really not sure I could actually do it. But
of course, I've had to perform in whiskey warehouses from time to time.
That must be terrible.
You know, one of my favourite things that can ever happen to you when you're visiting a distillery is when usually it would be the manager or somebody fairly senior. It's not the usual tour guide. They take you in and they get the bung shifter out and they open up the cask and get the Valence in and pour it into a glass. And to me, that is the most authentic experience. Yeah. It's happened to me a few times, but it never ceases to make me feel very privileged. Yeah, you get a chance to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's. I think we first discovered. I think it was before we opened the shop, and me and a group of friends used to go out in a car round about New Year when all the distilleries were closed, and we take a few bottles of whiskey and get one of the friends' wives to drive us and take us around a few places. And we stopped off in Dufton, and we saw Whiskey for Breakfast CD in the Dufton whiskey shop, and picked it up. And we thought, oh, this looks like it could be a good fun CD to put on. And we hadn't even left Dufton, and we were all just sitting in silence listening to this, laughing and almost singing along with it as well. So it's pretty encapsulating the songs. What I love about them as well is that you're just telling stories to music, and it's so easy to get lost in that. It's that kind of, because I think everyone in whiskey kind of relates a lot to it, or even not in whiskey, but you relate to what you're saying. You're telling stories about people or whiskey or distilleries that people kind of, I've been there, or I know that person, or I've drank that whiskey, and it's so easy just to get lost into it. I think that's a big appeal, and that's global. That's a big global appeal.
Yeah, sure.
You're in massage parlors in Bergamo as well as whiskey clubs and whiskey bars.
You mentioned the Corries as one of your early kind of influences, and to be exactly the same for me. My parents, the very first concert I ever went to as a young boy was the Corries in Dingwall, and I was even more fortunate that my mum and dad were able to get us behind the backstage afterwards. I was able to meet Ronnie and Roy. And I was completely and utterly starstruck. I've loved them ever since. Totally devastated. When Ronnie passed and when Roy passed, sorry. I thought it was a tragic loss to music in general. But yeah, the fun stories that you've got and then the serious songs very much to me falls along that kind of line as well.
Yeah, they did that. They combined the serious stuff with the humorous stuff.
Yep.
And I can't help myself, that's just, it reflects who I am and what I'm interested in. And so I'm capable of writing and singing serious lyrical stuff, but then I always want to do something about a blow-up doll, to lighten the mood.
But that was the glorious thing about the Corries concerts, because you could sit there and cry at Loch the Gar and all this kind of stuff, and the Tay-Boat song, and then they would sing whatever the
Body Lasts 5 Years or something.
Something the Sunday Driver and stuff like that. You know, just
the,
to kind
the Bantam Cock was one of my favourites.
yeah,
But
yeah, there was always one, and they would do jokes. It was the way that because
yeah.
Roy was always seen as a serious one, so Ronnie would play on that, and kind of try and trip him up along the way.
They were extremely professional.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there's never been. I don't think there's been a folk music duo of the same standard in Scotland.
No.
You know.
No. They certainly had that kind of professional comedy kind of act as well that kind of went on. You know, it was almost like a Morecambe and Wise, where there was the serious and the comedy, and it was as if the show was descending into chaos, but it was all kind of.
They were in complete control of the chaos. Absolutely, yeah.
And they were very popular. I mean, I remember going to see them in the Lyceum and the Usher Hall in Edinburgh, and the huge audiences.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a funny thing. I got interested in the Corries, I think because my first wife was, she liked them very much, and so I got more into them because of her influence. But I started to listen to the Corries after they were a trio. Remember, they were a trio with Paddy Bell.
Beginning, I don't remember that actually, but
I don't remember that. But Paddy Bell played with the Corries, and then Paddy Bell had, she dropped out of music, and I think she was one of these women that she got prescribed antidepressants, and she got kind of hooked on them for years and years, and her life became, I think, a bit blighted and a bit overshadowed by this dependency on these, on these prescription drugs. And eventually, like so many women, she realized this was a problem, and she managed to get out of it. And then she had a bit of a renaissance. She picked up the guitar again, and she started. I mean, she was an old woman by this time. She started playing, and she made a couple of CDs. And she asked me if she could record a couple of my songs on her CDs, and that, to me, that was a great honor. You know, this woman who'd been a bit of a legend early on, singing with the Corries, and then she went through this dark period, and then she came a revitalization, if you like. Sadly, she died a few years after that, but she had her comeback, and that was good for her. And I was happy to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just, I don't know if you see me fighting with a label there, or a seal. So I've just opened, it came into the shop yesterday.
Well, the Campbellton Loch.
Made famous by a far less talented singer-songwriter than yourself, Robin, obviously. The Campbellton Loch, I Wish You Were Whisky. So I've just opened that to see. So this is have you seen this one released, Robin?
No, I haven't seen it.
So it's a blended malt from Campbellton. So there's
is it good? Have a taste and tell me if it's good.
I don't know.
But that song was done by Andy Stewart.
Yes,
and
he's, as I said, a far less talented man than yourself.
Well, he was an extremely talented entertainer. You got to take your hat off to him. If you listen to some of his recordings, he was just amazing. He could do accents like nobody.
Yeah, he did that. He did that song, didn't he? With obviously all the way around Scotland, didn't he? He did that kind of.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
That's right. He did every accent throughout the song. And Donald, where's your trousers?
Hoots man.
Yeah,
Hoots man. Yeah. No, fantastic stuff. Absolutely. But yeah, I remember back in the day, Jim Reeves was one of the records that was always playing in our house as well. But my dad liked a bit of country and western, but it was the kind of stuff like Don Williams and Charlie Pride and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to a bit of Tammy Wynette, all the kind of depressing stuff. Yeah. So yeah.
What's it like then, Mike?
It's not bad actually. It's.
You're not reaching for the ginger ale then?
No, I certainly wouldn't do that. It's interesting. It's maybe because I've come off that really kind of punchy wine cask. Mm-hmm. It's taken me a wee bit. It's certainly got that kind of earthiness. There's a wee mossy kind of note to it. I think that kind of green.
Mossy riverbanks.
It's a blend of
I'm
all.
thinking indoor, like dampness, like an abandoned house kind of thing, where it's.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever jumped into one of these haunted houses that had never been set foot on. You've got that mossy kind of dampness
All right.
inside. It's certainly, I think, obviously I know because of the bottle, but it's got that funny kind of coastal element to it as well.
So does it taste like the edge of Campbellton Loch?
I haven't been there, so I've been to
wish-
Campbellton, but not to the edge of the loch. So.
The song is about Campbellton Loch. I wish you were whiskey, I would drink you dry. But Campbellton Loch's a sea loch.
Yeah.
So
You're not going to
you'd
drink
have
that dry,
trouble.
or you'll be very dry after you've drunk it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very nice. It's not as in your face as either like the Springbank or the Coquette. I'm not sure if it's peated or no. I'm not getting any peat at all. It's that.
There's bound to be a bit in there somewhere, surely.
There must be. Well, it's saying Campbellton's 5 distinct malts, so that must be the 3
so there's bound to be a bit
Springbanks.
of peat in there. Yeah.
That doesn't come across.
Maybe the Hazelburns popping right over the top of it all.
It doesn't come across as peaty. More of a charring, like an oaky note.
Well, I've come down a wee bit from the Brewer Claddie as well. This is now a 24-year-old Mortlach.
Oof, come down.
Yeah. Well,
up in age, but down in punch, I suppose.
It hasn't got the same, punchiness as exactly. Yeah, it hasn't got the same lively attack. This is much more of a demure and mature Speyside with a lovely, slightly floral, waxy note that you get. Yeah.
It's quite a difficult dram to get a hold of these days, Mortlach, as well. I mean over your years of drinking whiskey, what are the ones that you would say you miss the most that is really hard to get a hold of?
Talisker 100 proof.
Okay. Yeah.
And, I'm going to be controversial now, but there are whiskies that I used to drink and enjoy that either are too expensive now or they are not the same.
Yes.
This is all old men sound the same. When I was a kid, Golden Wonder crisps tasted better, or dairy milk tasted better, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But Talisker 100 proof, there's nothing. The Talisker, although it's still great, and you've got one there, Russell, I think.
I do. I've got the Amoroso.
I still love the Talisker, but I don't think it's got most of them have not got the earth, wind, and fire that the old Talisker had. And another one is Highland Park. I mean, one of the whiskies that I served at my wedding, this is my third wedding, was a 25-year-old Highland Park. I had done a couple of gigs at Highland Park with Michael Jackson and brought back some really nice, old Highland Park, 24-year-old special bottling and a 25-year-old standard bottling. And I served that at my wedding, and it was a fantastic dram. And they're just not producing the same, the same character anymore. And it's not only true of Highland Park and Talisker. If you look at what Macallan are producing now, it's not what I knew of Macallan 30 years ago,
Do you think that's because they're pushing out just more bulk these days? I mean, or have you got a kind of hypothesis as to why you think that is the case?
I think there'll be a number of different reasons. One of them may be that it's not so easy to get the same casks that you could get back in the day.
Okay.
Some of it may be to do with the processes. even something esoteric like Macallan changed the barley. For years, they said we only use Golden Promise.
Mhm.
And then they changed the barley. And for years, they said we only mature in Oloroso casks. And then they came out with a fine oak. And, and Macallan, some of the fine oaks are actually very nice drams, but it's very difficult for me now to get a Macallan or a Highland Park or a Talisker that takes me back to what I remember tasting before.
Yeah.
One of my favourite whiskies was always the 17-year-old Bowmore. And although we still get some very nice 17-year-old Bowmores through the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, the whiskies that you get from Bowmore itself are, they're not quite in the same standard. They're still great whiskies, but I don't know. I think we have to be careful in Scotland that there's a creeping kind of sameness going on, that a lot of whiskey distilleries are losing their individual character and becoming very similar.
Yeah. Just with all the finishes, you think? And
I have mixed views about the finishes. I mean, I campaigned long enough for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society to do finishes because they wouldn't. They refused. For many years, they said if you move it from one cask to another, it's no longer a single cask, and that was their thing, single cask whiskies. But for one reason or another, they now do it, and I think it's a good move. I mean, up behind me, got Aberlour Abuna, which inspired me to write a love song for whiskey, and it's a no age statement. Generally speaking, I'm suspicious of no age statement whiskies. But you get good ones, like that.
I suppose as well, you've got. I mean, you've had guys who've always experimented, like your Ben Rees, is the first one that comes to mind. They've always done lots of different styles, lots of different casks.
Yeah.
But we're seeing that more and more, as you say, that the lines between regions are getting blurred. We're getting peated space sides, we're getting unpeated Islas, and everything in between. Do you think that's commercially driven, that every distillery wants to appeal to everyone, rather than, if you like Springbank, this is the flavour you will get. If you like Bruichladdich, this is the flavour you'll get. And now they're saying, well, if we produce peated Glenlivet, we will get the peat fans on board as well, and they will come and join us.
I think it's very complex. I'm seeing some people agreeing with, Comet Tobias saying he agrees about the Highland Park. You get these. Springbank had its heyday, was the 21-year-old that got so much adulation. It was a fantastic dram. Old Pulteney, it was Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible that put the 21-year-old Old Pulteney as the best whiskey in the world. I'm sure there are very few people that would have agreed with that entirely, but it was obviously a good whiskey. But it's very difficult for a distillery to keep up that kind of level of excellence. And some of it's to do with the process and, the fact that the wood management is something that you have to seriously invest in now. And if you don't invest in it, you're missing a trick. When Bruichladdich took over, the new regime took over the distillery, they had lots of whiskey from, that had already been made, but it was mostly sitting in fairly boring casks because it was earmarked for blends. So they had to do something to bring out the best in that whiskey. It had been quite well made, but it wasn't well matured. So that's why they got into all these wine casks and everything. And I like that kind of experimentation. Bill Lumsden was doing it at Glenmorangie years ago.
He's built an experimental distillery now where you could do all that as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's a thoughtful sort of science background kind of guy, and I admire what he does.
But it must be difficult for the innovators, and again, the single malt, single cask, all these kind of things that we're very interested in, when the bulk of the market, the bulk of the money by a country mile is still led by the blend business. And that's the reason we're able to experiment, the reason we're able to have a bit of fun with the whiskies that we enjoy, is because the blend market is producing the money for the business to actually survive. So we're never going to get away from the fact that the bulk of whiskey that's actually going through a pot still or whatever, a column still, is going to go into a blended bottle.
I suppose on that note, Russ, a lot of the guys who are doing the kind of micro experimental stage, I suppose, are the guys who aren't providing for blends. They want to keep everything for themselves.
Yeah,
these are the guys who use small batch yeast experiments or barley experiments. Your Holyrood, your Ardnamurchans, your Burnabennies, these kind of guys are all so focused on pre-maturation to see what that would do. It's
I suppose they wouldn't be, but again, they wouldn't be able to do it without the bigger industry there driving the interest across the world as it does.
That's absolutely true, Russell. But the turn it on its head, and I think I would argue that some of the biggest companies they might be waking up to it now, but in the last 30 years, for example, they realized that their money was coming from the sale of millions of cases of blended whiskey, and so they tended to neglect the single malts and the distinctive character that came from each distillery, and they were not visionary, they were not experimental enough, and it took people like Billy Walker and Jim McEwen and Mark Rainey and Douglas Davidson at Isle of Arran to give them a bit of a boot up the arse and say, this is what we can do, and now they're beginning to catch up. But I think you can't blame them. Their shareholders are interested in profits, and that's where the profits are coming from. It's not from whiskey nerds like us.
But the thing is, nerds, what they don't realize is nerds like us will actually dabble in some of their blends once we've maybe realized what the components of that actually are. That will maybe think,
that's true. I mean, even if it's just because you need some whiskey for cooking with in the kitchen.
That's right. Indeed.
That's a joke.
Well, one of my favorite cocktails for that matter. Yeah.
My first, I think we either just before we opened the shop or we just opened the shop. One of my first whiskey tastings, we got invited to Meldrum House, quite local to us, for a Glenrothes tasting with Ronnie Cox, and we sat there, kind of what a guy to listen to as well. And he says, everyone loves single malts and all that, and he goes, "I quite like the blends. They're often very good for cleansing the palate." And I was like,
yeah, well.
Brilliant.
My friend Donald, I took him to Speyside. He said Speyside whiskies always gave him the hiccups. He didn't like them. So I took him to Speyside to try and convert him, and I was really trying hard. We would sit by the side of the River Spey looking out towards Macallan and drinking a Glenfarclas 105 or something like that, And he was there 3 days and he didn't have a hiccup yet. But we were in the Highlander Inn at one time, and he said to the woman behind the bar, he said, all this Speyside stuff's all very well and good, he says, but I really feel like a Laphroaig. Have you got a Laphroaig? And she turned to her colleague behind the bar and said, "Laphroaig, I think we've got some somewhere. We use that for cleaning the toilets."
Yeah, perfect.
I'm sure it wasn't true, but she was having a.
I'm sure it wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm
a big fan of the 105.
If you went to Islay and you were in the Lochside or the Port Charlotte Hotel and you asked for a Tommen towel or something. Give me a Tormore. What?
We use that to clean the toilets. Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't work.
Tormore's a great dram.
It is the pearl of Speyside, yes.
Fabulous dram.
I converted a woman with Tormore once.
Yeah.
Converted her to what?
Not good.
That's the way to say that. Buddhism.
Turned her into a frog.
There's a song for you. Yeah.
Turned the woman into a frog with Tormore. There we go.
I get this quite often, you know. I've never really liked whiskey. Could you recommend something? And so I'll have a gin and tonic. But this time we were in Speyside, and this woman said, "I've never really liked whiskey, but I see all you guys enjoying them. Can you recommend something for me to start?" You know. So I gave her a Tormore, and it worked. She said, "This is not what I was expecting. This is really nice."
Yeah. Well, but yeah, people expect the kind of big peat hit or the big smoky, the medicinal, or just that rubbish kind of blend that your dad used to drink back in the day or whatever. And you get something like Tormore that's got lovely kind of vanilla ice cream and all that kind of lovely tropical fruits and stuff. And it's like, oh, this is completely different.
I think as well, Russell, is you'll know you mentioned the blend there, and I think the people, you know, we spoke at it right at the start of the night about how we probably raided Dad's cabinet for our first whiskey experience, and it would have been the fullest bottle, which is probably the bottle that your dad didn't like or the one he just bought. So you grab it, and it could have been the Laphroaig or whatever.
Yeah.
Snuck off with your friends and drank it in the park, and it was awful, but you wanted to get drunk, so you drank it anyway. And then you woke up feeling absolutely ridiculously bad. But I think as well, the company that you're with and the reason for drinking it is very important. And one of the great stories that we spoke about from Charlie McLean when he was on our Blether was he was off down for a fishing trip, and he was always expected to take a bottle of whiskey. Everyone was expected to take a bottle of whiskey, I think. And he'd forgotten his, so he stopped off just in a wee garage, and he ran in and just grabbed the bottle off the shelf, and there we go, that'll do, and head off in the bothy after the fishing trip. Oh, Charlie, go and give us your bottle. So sure he did, and he poured it, and they had a great time. What a wonderful whiskey! This is amazing. Everyone's having a great laugh now. So Charlie, what's the secret? What's the whiskey? And it was like a $13.99 price labeled blend, and it was just like, you know, the cheapest whiskey that they had.
Star special. Yeah.
Before they knew it, they were all raving about it, thinking this is amazing. So I think there is that psychological side of it that if you're in good company, you'll never have a bad whiskey.
Yeah, and you know, there are reasons why people sometimes prefer blended whiskies. My wife's uncle was in the army, and all his career in the army, they would go to the mess and drink blended whiskey with soda, you know. And after he retired, I would say, "Oh, try this single malt or that single malt." He says, "No, I don't want any of that stuff. Just give me a blend." And Charlie, you know, I've been in Charlie's house a few times, and his philosophy, if I remember, he told me one time, is that he has two kinds of whiskey. He's got Gluggen whiskey and Sippin whiskey. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit like what I was saying about earlier on about the music that you listen to. When he's working in his little, he used to have a little writer's hut. He's now living in a flat in the new town. But when he's working, you know, when he's writing, he likes to have a dram beside him, but he doesn't want something too distracting. He doesn't want something that he has to savor and sniff and think about. He just wants what he calls Gluggen whiskey, you know.
Yeah.
And so he buys the blends because they're half the price. But when you want to drink whiskey as much more of a shared experience, you know, when you're sitting around with your pals and you want to talk about it and compare, you know, different drams, then you don't want the blended whiskey, really. You want good single malts. So
I suppose it depends on what level of friendship you have with them as to which whiskey you bring out.
It depends what you're doing as well. If you're talking about something else, if you're meeting up a heap of guys to talk about the football or the fishing or whatever it is you're doing, you're just drinking.
yeah,
So you don't want to be talking about the whiskey, but if you're talking about whiskey, then you want a whiskey that you can talk about.
sure.
It goes back to the start of the night when we're talking about the music.
Yeah.
If you've got good music in the background, you don't care about the. Not that you don't care, but you've got the whiskey there. But as long as it's not awful,
Yeah.
You've got good friends, you can talk about it. And
You're not going to put a Yes album on the back, and you've got to sit and listen to that. That's kind of.
Well,
we've got
you
John
might wish to listen to it. But to defend Charlie, if I was going on a boat, my experience of boats is that if you have something in a glass, you spill more than you drink.
Yes.
So I would go for the blends as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got John McSheen from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society on.
Are you still in Jamaica, John?
He says he's in the wrong time zone.
I guess so.
You must be still in Jamaica, yeah. He'll be sitting with a glass of rum. Philistine.
And I first met John on the Calmac over to Islay for the Islay Whisky Academy, and he was a bad influence on all of the group who were over there. It was always his place that we ended up after, and we'd have a few drams. So, got a lot of time for John. Nice to see you joining us.
I always warm to somebody who's a bad influence. I do.
I think we've probably got a bit of bad influence in us all. I'm liking David's comment. He said that we're talking about stealing a wee bit of drink at your dad's cabinet. David saying he's nearly 60, he still sneaks into his dad's blended drams.
That's when the in-laws aren't stealing his.
That's when the in-laws aren't stealing his. I got the blame. I got the blame for that.
Well, if David's got children, he'll be needing to watch the next generation, because I've got a 19-year-old son, and he's just beginning. Well, he's been discovering whiskey for the last year or so. Fortunately, he's in Canada at the moment, so he can't steal my whiskey.
Rick met John in October at the Islay Whisky Academy as well. So good to see that you're still keeping up the bad influence, John.
I think that's fantastic. I love that. A great bad influence. So that's the same initials as global brand ambassador. So that I think I could see myself as a GBA, a great bad influence. I like that.
I'm not sure how you spell influence, Russell, but
well, same thing. Affluence. Everybody spells like that after a few brief laddies, for sure.
Well, that's what they used to say. I'm sorry, I can't tie my own shoelaces because I'm under the affluence of alcohol.
That's right. So no, Chick Murray. He was a great comedian as well, wasn't he? Chick Murray.
Chick Murray, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Chick Young. Yeah.
Dry humor and great timing.
There's that money in the box when he was in the phone box. Yeah. Trying to get through to the operator. She came through and says, "Is there money in the box, sir?" No, hen, I'm just here myself.
That's before my time, that one, Russell.
That's what I just explained to people. These were red boxes used to put money in.
I've just been listening to watching some of on the iPlayer, the first series of Still Game.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes,
I think that's really funny as well.
Talking about the iPlayer, and actually it was somebody I meant to mention to you, and you've just brought it by mentioning iPlayer, because I went on to iPlayer recently to see if I could find it again. But Hamish Henderson, was he someone that influenced you at all, or?
Yeah, very much. Although when I was at Edinburgh Uni, as undergraduate anyway, I studied sociology, but I was always interested in Scottish culture. So in my second year, I did an additional course. It was over and above the other things that I was doing. all that economic history and anthropology and so on. And I did a course at the School of Scottish Studies, and that's where I met Hamish, and we became great friends, in fact. And
Oh, wonderful.
my daughter and his daughters, he had two daughters, they were the same age, and they would have a bit of a play together. And he would come up to my flat and drink my whiskey, the devil. And he died the same year that my son was born, and so we called him Hamish. So my son is called Hamish, really, well, partly because we like the name, but partly because of Hamish Henderson, who died the same year. Hamish was a great influence on me. I thought he was a wonderful guy, a real polymath, really well cultured, well read, intelligent, a good writer of poetry and songs, and great fun to drink with. When you get in Sandy Bells with him after a few drams of Isle of Jura, that was his favourite, I think. He would start singing the naughty songs, the ones that he didn't sing for the students in the classroom, and that was always good fun. That tickled me.
Fantastic. I to my shame, I wasn't that familiar with Hamish until the film came out. I think it was about 2016 or maybe around about then. It was in the cinemas. And obviously, when it came out, I became aware that I was loosely aware of who he was, but not as aware or as how influential he was in Scottish folk music and writing and poetry, and also his time in war in Italy and the Italian front and all that kind of stuff, which has led me to read much more about that campaign and see it in its own light, the D-Day dodging and stuff like that,
A guy with a big life and lots of achievements, and an interesting guy,
Well, that's incredible. He was a friend. I'm beyond jealous. I think that's a fantastic thing to have.
Yeah, we stayed friends for years and years and years. I mean, it was a long time ago that I met him as a student. When I was a student, but we stayed friends right through until he died. And occasionally, I would have sort of private burn suppers in my house. I lived on the outside, about 10 miles out of Edinburgh, near a place called Newbridge, and Hamish would come out to join us in the burn suppers. One time he brought this Australian guy he'd been sent over to Scotland to discover what Scotland, and he was in Ireland as well, but what Scotland and Ireland were doing to preserve and protect their cultural heritage, their folklore. And so obviously he got in tow with Hamish in the School of Scottish Studies, and Hamish took him to every pub in Edinburgh, brought him out to the burn supper at my house. He brought a bottle of Talisker, so that was good. This poor Australian had no idea what power Talisker could have, and he was drinking it like wine, and eventually he just totally collapsed in a heap. Not before he was able to give us a rendition of an Australian kind of folk poem. I remember it was a poem about the day MacArthur farted and saved the town from drought. So a couple of Taliskers, and it got this academic Australian into doing what Hamish and I were doing already, which was singing the rude songs, but he couldn't last the pace. Next thing, he was snoring on the couch.
He was a wonderful character. I mean, he just loved by everybody, and he loved everybody as well. I mean, it was just that kind of unconditional friendship, wasn't it? It was kind of
and he really loved the whole folklore thing,
Yeah.
I met him one time down at Padstow. I lived in Cornwall for 4 years.
Okay.
And even after I'd come back to Scotland, if I got the chance, I would go down for the 1st of May to the celebrations in Padstow. The Padstow May Day is very powerful. And one time I was down there, and I met him prowling about the place, talking to people. He'd been going there for years, and it was nice just to bump into him. And the next time I went down, I was buying some postcards, and here's one of the postcards of the hobby horse dancing around the streets of Padstow, and there's unmistakable Hamish standing behind it, with his characteristic hat and coat and scarf and the moustache,
Yeah.
Couldn't miss him.
Yeah. Fabulous.
We've just had Thomas Evers coming in to say hello.
Oh, Thomas. Hello, Thomas. We were talking about you before, Thomas, but it was all good. Don't worry. Thomas is the guy who was responsible for giving me the inspiration and the work for this album that you see on the background there, up in the dram room, and also the whiskey that I am drinking.
You're back on it. So this is Thomas in the
back on it. Yeah, look, Malt of Scotland.
Is this Thomas here?
Yeah, that's Thomas.
Yes.
There we go. Hi, Thomas. How you doing? You're on screen. So what? I mean, is there a connection with Paderborn other than Thomas?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I met Thomas, and he has a business, and it feels a bit awkward talking about him when he's there, but he produces bottlings of really high quality, and obviously I'm associated with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society as well. But what I've found really interesting is that over the last 10 years, I would say, the Independent Bottlers Challenge run by Whisky Magazine, I think almost without exception, the last one being an exception, but before that, the winner of the Independent Bottler Challenge was about 50-50. It was either the Scotch Malt Whisky Society or it was Malts of Scotland. Nobody else came near. So, I respect that kind of consistency and quality.
Yeah, for sure.
So cheers. Oh, holding up my water bottle. Cheers,
Thomas.
Thomas.
Cheers, Thomas. Cheers, Thomas. Yeah, slash.
I do. I get caught out with that as well. I was having a laugh. We had a tasting on Friday. Just 4 guys in for four people in for a gin tasting, and I opened the water bottle, and I smelt it, and I get so often get caught out with that by smelling it,
sniffing the water. Yeah,
it's a water bottle. You're sniffing it. That's when you know you've got a certain point where you're smelling the water before you drink it.
but that's what we're taught to do. You're taught to just anybody says you want to get to know whiskey, you want to understand flavour. Smell, and smell
everything. Yeah.
Well, you should smell everything, really, because the sense of smell that we have as a human species derives its potency mostly from being able to detect things that are harmful to us.
Yeah.
So, if you didn't smell the water before you tasted it, you'd get a bloody shock if it was the kind of ditch water that the young lassie put in Uncle Wolf's whiskey bottle, or if somebody had peed in an iron brew bottle and
when you weren't looking,
you thought it was iron brew. Always have a sniff first. That's what I say.
I think that's something that Jim McEwen said on one of the tastings we had when we were doing the virtuals. And it's something that kind of resonated with me. And I've been kind of smelling whiskey for kind of 6 years professionally, professionally from the shop. And he says the first thing he looks for is the bad notes or the off notes. And for me, it was always about finding something good about the whiskey. And it was like chasing that good flavors. Is like what's good about the whiskey. And when he said that, it's like it's absolutely right, because as soon as you smell something off or bad, then there's something needs done with the whiskey. If you can't find that off note, then there's nothing wrong with the whiskey. It might not be to everyone's taste. It might not be wow in your face, great, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's like that's what he looks for when he smells a cask, is something that's not right. rather than try to search the good stuff, chasing the good drama, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the first thing. It should always be. It's your sense that warns you about danger.
Yeah.
And I do wonder about the impact on the whiskey industry of coronavirus, because some of the people who had COVID, they lose their sense of taste and smell. And if you look, I mean, I was dreading this. I did get COVID right at the beginning of this year, despite being 3 times vaccinated. But I was really worried in case I would lose my sense of smell, because how can you be on the tasting panel for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society? How can you enjoy a dram? I would, if I lost my sense of taste and smell, I would drink vodka, because it doesn't have any taste or smell.
Yeah,
save yourself a fortune.
And it's cheaper. It's a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Because I noticed that was it Blair Bowman went through that issue, that he contracted and he kind of had to cancel a load of bookings as well because he couldn't
really
commit.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's scary to think that something you look at guys like Richard Patterson, I suppose, who's got his nose insured and
the nose
and all that. You can see why you haven't heard much from these guys. They're obviously still sitting doing their job, but they're not out in hosting kind of events.
They're not appearing at events. Yeah. And it might be a couple of years before these guys are confident enough to get out in the public.
We certainly had a couple of customers who've come in who've said, "I'm not buying just now because I can't taste or smell anything, so it's a waste of money for me just now." And you can feel their pain. It's awful, but but even with COVID, my dad in his latter years, not long before he died, he had a terrible sort of chronic sinus infection, and he couldn't taste any food. And by this stage, of course, my mum had passed, so he was very sad and lonely until his kind of end of days anyway. But the fact he lost his taste and smell at the same time meant he couldn't even enjoy a dram. He couldn't enjoy food. So his whole existence became terrible. And it's one of these things, one of the greatest pleasures we have in life is eating and drinking.
Absolutely.
So if you actually can't get the sense of satisfaction of the taste and smell, it's awful, absolutely awful. And I can just imagine your panic completely. Yeah.
I just got a private message from Tobias who's watching, and it's just pinged up. Yeah, he was at dinner with yourself.
Private message, Michael. Private message.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
it just pinged up. But with yourself, Robin, and Jim, and Thomas, and he said he would literally commit a crime to have that again.
Yeah, I know, but Jim has retired.
Yeah.
So
we've heard that before.
But
he
seems to have actually done that this time. He seems to have really retired.
He seems to have,
And doff the cap, chapeau, well done. Because it must be really hard. It must be really hard to give it up. I mean, he's had such a career of adulation, love, fame. It must be really, really hard to actually.
I think the love is the important thing. You do feel that love from when you're appreciated by an audience. Yeah, that's difficult to give up.
Yeah.
But he has other love in his life. He has the love of his wife and children and grandchildren.
And his grandchildren, which is what he really wanted to go and spend time doing. And fantastic. And that's exactly, he's done exactly the right thing.
Yeah. Me, I've got, wives and children and grandchildren as well, but I'm not giving up. I mean, I'm going to be 70 next birthday. So I should really be hanging up my spurs.
No, not at all. Not at all. Don't you dare. But we were talking to some of the younger guns fairly recently. Your Ian Forteiths at Angus Dundee, your Scott Adamsons at Tomatin, and the likes who are starting to get involved with the making of whiskey and that kind of thing. I think these are the guys that are our future, and these are the guys we should be starting to invest and spend a lot more time in.
Yeah.
But not only that, is at my age and at our age, I've got people like me and lots of people like me who are not, kind of immersed in the industry, have got much more access to these guys than my dad would have had to Jim McEwen or Bill Patterson or some of these guys when they were kind of working their way up, because there wasn't the same contact.
Yeah.
So I'm going to grow through my whiskey journey knowing Ian Forteith really well, knowing Scott Adamson, Paul, all these guys, and getting access, Alan Finlay at Spey, which people didn't have before. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a different generation and a different time.
And they will be entertaining storytellers as well.
Yeah.
But there's one thing that you can't fake, and that's more than 50 years in the industry and knowing what it was like in the days when they stole whiskey in ketchup bottles,
Yeah.
I think that's the generation
that's the bit that's going to miss.
Yeah.
We're going to need history tellers in the future as opposed to real life storytellers. People who understand their history and understand the stories and have kind of kept that going.
If only we knew somebody who could put that into a song or a poem that you could record.
Who could that be?
If only we knew. Oh, I don't know. Maybe we'll come across somebody in our travel.
Maybe. You never know.
I did often think it would be wonderful to catch some of Jim's stories and make them up into a kind of para-handy tales thing. But we had Udo. I don't know if Udo's still here, but Udo's produced a book, about Jim McEwen.
About Jim, yeah, that's right. That's right, yeah.
And it's a wonderful
I love
job.
the story. I can't remember if it was you told me, Robin, or if it was Jim, but it was about the warehouse and the guy with the wellies, that he had his wellies full of whiskey.
That would be Jim. Yeah,
that was Jim.
Yeah.
I've only stolen, one of Jim's stories. I retell the one about the Black Art because I have a song about Black Art whiskey, and it makes a nice introduction to it. But no, I don't steal other people's stories. Well, occasionally, I might find inspiration in someone else's story.
You can tell somebody else's story without stealing it.
Yeah, I usually say I was there, and this is what Jim said, in that situation. Yeah, I tell the story, but as if I was an observer. I don't say it was me.
Yeah.
That's not stealing. That's
sharing.
That's giving tribute.
Yeah, it's giving tribute and sharing. It's the verbal form of referencing.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, guys, we've just knocked past the 2 hour mark.
We have indeed. Without even noticing it. Wow.
Which I did not notice. The last time I looked at it, I thought we were reaching about 1:20, an hour and 20. Right. We're going to say goodnight to everyone because, we've all got jobs to do. And as much as I would love to sit and drink whiskey with you all night, we want to keep you guys involved for next week. And I would love to get you back on another Blether. I would love even more to get you up to play some tunes in the Inverary Whisky Shop. And we can't wait to organise that. But thank you so much for your time tonight. The stories have been great. The inspiration has been great. And from the comments, everyone who knows you loves what you bring to whiskey and loves what you do for us. And the fact that we've got a lot of your songs recorded, I think we're going to be hearing of Robin Laing for a long, long time to come, which is fantastic.
I think the other thing is, and thank you very much for the other guys that have come along to tonight. But Robin, you've pulled in a few people who don't normally watch our Blethers. So really pleased, guys, that you've come along. If you feel like coming back and listen to some of the other guys that we've got, please do. But absolute fit for yourself, Robin. You've kind of pulled some of these guys along tonight as well. So one of the things we forgot to say earlier on, which we always do, just hold on when we go off live till we just have a little wee chat with you after as well, Robin. Once we kind of go off.
Sure.
But next week we've got Matt Cordner. Matt is the global brand ambassador for Bacardi, Dewar's. with whiskies like Baltimore, Macduff, Craigellachie, and a few others that I can't just bring to mind. Aberfeldy, I think, is another. So Matt's going to come on next week. Matt, when we met him a few months ago at Altmore, was saying he's probably the only global brand ambassador that's never left the country, due to being appointed during the coronavirus situation. So come along and hear about what it's like to be a new brand ambassador and one of the guys getting involved in the industry at a time when restrictions have been and made it very difficult for that kind of thing. So same time next week with Matt.
I was just going to say a bit as well. Just if you pop onto the whiskey shop, you can buy what we call the Blether box, which we do kind of on a monthly basis. We update monthly, so we catered dram samples for our guests.
Tailored. That's the word.
For our guests. So next week we've got an Altmore. This week we had the Port Charlotte. We never actually talked much about Port Charlotte.
We didn't talk
Port
about
Charlotte. PAC in their wine cask Port Charlotte. It's close that we had in the shop to this guy.
Well, the only other option was Mike and I actually sharing our bottles, and that clearly was never going to happen, guys.
Not going to happen.
Really sorry, but
three-way.
Yeah.
So if you're looking on the shop, you'll find what's coming up next, and we try and tailor suit the drams to fit the guests. So if you're interested in continuing to follow us, the March Blether box is now available at the shop.
Yep.
But it's purely optional. Bring your own drams by all means.
Yeah.
And let us know what you're drinking, because we love to talk about whiskey at all times.
Indeed, absolutely, and especially with esteemed guests like Robin.
And Mike, Russell, these Blether sessions are also available for a while on Catch Up. You can.
Yeah,
absolutely. You'll get them forever on YouTube and through the Facebook page as well, the Inverurie Whisky Shop Facebook page. So yeah,
and the Highland Whisky Academy Facebook page as well.
Yep.
And yeah, so there is. I mean, we've been doing this for, it must be coming up to a year now.
We must be about a year. It was about this time last year that we started.
So there could well be about 50 Blethers we've had.
There must be about getting on for that, and so we're booked all the way into May, so we need to start looking at some more people into May. So yeah, we'll. Any ideas for who you'd like us to try and get onto a Blether, guys? Let us know. Send me a message, say Russell at Inverurie Whisky Shop, and I'll see if I can chase up anybody that you'd like us to try and get onto a Blether.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much, guys. I'm just going to pour one last wee splash of this to say thank you to Robin, thank you to Thomas as well, who took the time out to join us, and the inspiration for such a great dram, such a great album, and great show. So, Slàinte mhath.
Slàinte.
Cheers, Mike, Russell, everybody. Slàinte mhath.
Slàinte mhath.
And good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.